Ripple spent $2.45 billion in acquisitions in the last 7 months of 2025. And if you're not paying attention right now, you're missing what they're building. It's going to be the biggest financial infrastructure play. These type of acquisitions have happened before. They were for companies like Google or Amazon. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why Ripple is going to be positioned to take over a lot of the financial infrastructure and play the biggest role in the way the world moves moving forward through their acquisitions that they've had with Hidden Road, G Treasury, Rail, and many more. And also, for those that own XRP, why this is important to you. So before we dive into 2025 mega deals that Ripple did, you need to understand Ripple has been systematically building this infrastructure for more than a decade. These weren't just random acquisitions. They were the actual building blocks they needed right after the lawsuit to really propel themselves into position to take full advantage of the Cambrian explosion we're going to see here in 2026 for digital assets. And Ripple was systematically acquiring these technical capabilities and institutional relationships far longer than just this last year, but this last year really cemented them in the position to take full advantage of it. Let's take it back to 2012 when Ripple was actually formed. Obviously, you know, they've grown a lot since then. Their valuation when they first came out was far less than what it is today. The last round that they just had Citadel and Fortress invest in was at a $40 billion valuation, $250 per share, which is the same price that they actually had the tender offer at this year also. Let's talk about all the acquisitions that Ripple made. In 2019, they acquired Logos, which was an Icelandic development firm specializing in non-custodial wallet technology, and that gave Ripple the critical infrastructure to secure and have user-controlled digital asset storage. In 2021, they acquired Algrim, which was another Icelandic company, but it brought expertise in cryptocurrency, custody solutions alongside what they had acquired before and added deeper custody capabilities for digital assets and storage. In 2023, they made their landmark acquisition of Medico, was an international custodian, and they had a lot of the broader relationships that Ripple didn't have, and they did that acquisition for $250 million, which was the largest acquisition that they had made at the time. Ripple has also made a prolific amount of investments in strategic infrastructure and initiatives that have been building on the XRPL and other companies over the term that they've been in operation, which have secured them either board seats or positions to help that company navigate to where they need them to be in order to work well with them or set them up for an acquisition later on. Medico was one of these situations for Ripple. Medico itself was a Swiss digital asset custody and tokenization firm. Harmonized platform gave Ripple enterprise-grade custody infrastructure that they could then go to competition with Fireblocks and Copper and some of the other providers in the space. And it brought in relationships with major financial institutions already using their services that Ripple hadn't acquired, been connected to at that point. And last but not least, you guys probably remember this one with the whole Palisade debacle that took place. Ripple acquired standard custody in 2024 after Boathouse and that whole thing played out. They had looked at Fortress previous for a trust bank, and they had actually made a strategic investment in Fortress, but after they issued the LOI and did deeper due diligence, that deal didn't go through. They eventually did make the acquisition of standard custody the next year in 24, which gave them a bit license and other things as well. Standard custody is an enterprise-grade platform for digital assets with a New York trust charter. The deal closed in June of 2024 and received regulatory approvals. The New York Department of Financial Services, or NYDFS, is who regulates this trust company in Ripple's portfolio. And in this acquisition, they actually got Jack McDonald, who is currently head of stablecoins there at Ripple globally. So that sets the scene. We're now at a position where Ripple has a lot of the custody software. They have a New York trust bank and trust license here in the US. They've positioned themselves to apply for that bank charter that we saw here in 2025, where they were able to roll up multiple companies to really provide an end-to-end solution for these large financial institutions that's going to be second to none. So let's break this down 2025 into 4 pillars that are the key infrastructure plays and the acquisitions that Ripple made in 2025. Ripple executed 4 major moves in 2025 that most people are treating as separate events, but they really, again, culminate to one huge end-to-end service for institutions. You've got Hidden Road, which was for $1.25 billion in April. You've got Rail, which was $200 million in August. G Treasury for $1 billion in October. And you also have Evernorth, which was launched, which is a separate treasury company for XRP, announced in late October of this year. And alongside Palisade, which is a wallet and custody infrastructure firm, which they announced in November. And they kind of meet you where you are too. If you have some of this infrastructure, they can fill the gaps, and so that you can bring your stablecoin or treasury services or really implement, blockchain infrastructure with your existing banking rails. These aren't just random acquisitions, they're pillars for a master plan. To understand what Ripple is building, you need to see how these pieces fit together and their previous acquisitions. Each acquisition solves a specific problem in institutional finance, and together they create a vertically integrated platform controlling multiple layers. This is the infrastructure building, not just a collection of companies. So think about it from the traditional financial services model. What are required at an institutional case? What would the Amazon of financial infrastructure look like, and what would that require? Well, you need custody and clearing for assets. You need treasury management for corporate operations. You need payment rails that work, globally 24/7, 365. You need a stablecoin infrastructure for efficient settlements, and you need settlement assets to be able to move between all of those, and a treasury or a way to provide that to people that do want to hold it themselves. And Ripple has acquired all of these or built these components over the past more than a decade, since 2012. So let's touch on the first pillar, and the one that's probably the most prominent in people's minds here in 2025 for the acquisitions that Ripple made, and that was Hidden Road. Hidden Road is a prime broker, and they are now called Ripple Prime. They made that acquisition for $1.25 billion. It's one of the largest crypto acquisitions in history. And Hidden Road, being a prime broker firm, most retail investors would have never heard of this. But in institutional finance, prime brokers are absolutely critical for infrastructure. Prime brokers provide the behind-the-scenes services that make institutional trading possible. They handle clearing, and they make sure trades actually settle between counterparties. They provide custody and hold assets securely. They offer financing, basically marginal lines of credit, which allows institutions to leverage positions or the assets on their balance sheet. And they enable complex strategies across multiple asset classes. So if you wanted to trade a commodity for a stock or interoperability between financial products, they have windows at all of these different providers, and they provide one avenue to settle across all of that infrastructure. And Hidden Road does that, I think, better than both Coinbase and FalconX, and we'll talk about why here in just a second. But Hidden Road specifically operates across 5 major areas. One is foreign exchange or FX markets, trading and settlement. You have digital assets, including cryptocurrencies. They're on the forefront of that, obviously, alongside Coinbase Prime and FalconX. They do derivatives and options trading. So again, you can use things as collateral and then get derivatives exposure or hedge volatility by trading options. They do interest rate swaps, and they also do fixed income securities. So between all of those, it really complements well to the treasury management services and a lot of the other acquisitions that they've made. And Hidden Road's already been doing this. They work with over 300 institutional clients, and that includes major hedge funds. In 2024, they did more than $3 trillion in clearing. The number hasn't come out for 2025 yet, but I think it'll be significantly higher than that, especially post the acquisition. They were founded in 2018 by Mark Ashe, who came from Steve Cohen's Point72. And their main competitors on the institutional side are prime brokers like FalconX and Coinbase Prime. The strategic importance for Ripple cannot be overstated on this deal. This is probably, again, and probably why it sticks out as the most prominent acquisition for Ripple in 2025, is instant credibility with institutional investors and hedge funds. The infrastructure to serve the most sophisticated market participants possible. That's what Hidden Road provides. And this allows them the ability to custody, clear, and finance at an institutional level for digital assets, derivatives, FX, and all of the other pieces I mentioned before. Also, it's already proven it's a profitable business, processes trillions of dollars annually. And this integration shows how Ripple is thinking about things. Hidden Road will use ROUSD, or the stablecoin issued by Ripple, as collateral across prime brokerage products. And this creates organic demand for Ripple stablecoin with institutional adoption. Institutions using Hidden Road automatically get exposure to Ripple's digital asset infrastructure. And this is like a Trojan horse strategy. They are now behind the scenes, and it also positioned them to have some leverage in getting their banking license. There's never been a prime broker owned by a non-bank. And this allows them to serve institutions with what they need and introduce them to digital assets in a way that is credible and already integrated with their infrastructure. This also brought in 300 plus institutional relationships directly Ripple's ecosystem. Every hedge fund, trading firm, and institution using Hidden Road now touches Ripple. That's 300 plus new clients who will see Ripple's capabilities demonstrated real time with these operations. Now that the transition's been made and the acquisition's been closed, Ripple Prime has been rebranded and brought to market. So since the acquisition announcement, Ripple Prime's business has grown by 3 10x, if you can imagine that. So again, trading 3 trillion in 2024, you can imagine the numbers that we're going to see that come out for 2025, which is why this is so huge. And again, I don't know how to impress upon you the institutional adoption we're going to see for ROUSD and for XRP from Hidden Road and Ripple over the next 5 to 10 years. The second pillar that really kind of solidified Ripple as the juggernaut that they are today here in 2025 was the acquisition of Rail, the stablecoin payment infrastructure. And they did that for about $200 million in August of 2025. This is a critical piece most people overlooked because they announced G Treasury very shortly after that. Rail is a Toronto-based stablecoin powered platform, and they allow for payments for stablecoins. They're backed by Galaxy Ventures, and Ripple and a few other people in the earlier rounds. Rail is forecasted to process over 10% of the $36 billion global B2B stablecoin payments in 2025, which is wild. So that's, 10% of that entire market, which is approximately $3.6 billion in payment volume. And that's only going to escalate, again, as more people use ROUSD and launch their own stablecoins. We now have the Genius Act, and I think 2026 is going to be the year of stablecoin adoption for large financial institutions. So this positions Ripple to be the go-to solution for that. If they're going to be issuing a stablecoin and need all of these services, why would you go build it yourself when you can just work with them, who is, Ripple, who is already a very credible counterparty. So what does Rail actually bring to Ripple's ecosystem? Virtual accounts that eliminate the need for businesses to hold crypto directly. They automate back office infrastructure and it streamlines their operations. There's no requirements for customers to open a dedicated crypto bank account or wallets on exchanges. This is a seamless integration that allows for intelligent payout routing across multiple corridors. And Rail has capabilities at an enterprise level. So they support all the different stablecoins, stablecoin pay-ins and payouts across key corridors, including USD, Euro, Great British Pound, and many other currency pairs as well. And they actually already support USDC and USDT, and obviously they've integrated ROUSD now that acquisition's been made, and they operate 24/7, 365. That's a huge deal when working with a counterparty, because most banks and institutions aren't going to be able to settle overnight. They're not going to be able to settle on the weekends. You need access when you want to move on something and change your capital structure or allocation. And they operate through a single API, which streamlines everything for onboarding. They have more than 12 banking partners they use in order to be able to provide redundancy and the reliability and de-risk, some of the back end stuff that they do. And I think that that's imperative. You don't want just one counterparty in that position. You need to be able to mitigate risk across multiple counterparties in case there is some issue for whatever reason. So what is the strategic importance for Rail? Well, it makes Ripple Payments the most comprehensive end-to-end stablecoin payment solution out there, period. It allows businesses to transact in digital assets without having to actually hold those cryptos on their balance sheet, and it enables third-party payments, basically on behalf of the customers and internal treasury flows, which allows them to provide the infrastructure layer that makes stablecoin adoption frictionless for traditional businesses at enterprise level. So all of the hesitation that many players may have that have come from, having to build all this themselves or understand it, or the regulation component, with 2026, we should see the full Clarity Act come through. I think that Ripple, again, is positioned to make this super simple for institutional adoption. So how does that actually work with G Treasury and some of the other stuff, Ripple has acquired? Well, G Treasury clients can now route payments through Rail stablecoin infrastructure. And Hidden Road provides the institutional liquidity and custody for large stablecoin transactions. The combination creates a seamless flow for corporate treasury decisions to be made instantly with stablecoin execution. And this acquisition positions Ripple to dominate stablecoin B2B payments in 2026 and beyond. Here in 2025, we saw $46 billion settled in stablecoins this year, and that's going to grow exponentially in 2026. The market is estimated to reach trillions of dollars next year. Ripple's 10% market share puts Ripple immediately at the forefront of this and allows ROUSD's growth become exponential, while Rail becomes the distribution engine for Ripple's stablecoin, effectively. Pillar number 3, G Treasury. This is another huge acquisition that Ripple made in 2025, and it's their corporate gateway. In October of this year, in 2025, Ripple announced the acquisition of G Treasury for $1 billion. This might even be more significant than Hidden Road over the long term. And the deal closed in December of 2025. G Treasury is the global leader in treasury management solutions. They serve some of the largest corporations, including Fortune 500 companies, to manage their cash flow. Corporate treasury is at the heart of any major business. Treasury management is for all the cash and the payments and the financial risk for a company. They handle foreign exchange exposure across multiple currencies. They ensure that the company can operate globally while managing complexity. And they're responsible for the liquidity. They make sure the business can pay its bills and take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. G Treasury has been building treasury software for over 40 years. Their client list includes some of the most recognizable brands globally. American Airlines uses G Treasury for their treasury management options. Goodyear manages their global cash flows with G Treasury, Volvo, and many, many more. These billion-dollar enterprises trust G Treasury with their financial operations. The scale of the operations is staggering. G Treasury processes $12.5 trillion in payment volume annually. They're $12.5 trillion flowing through their systems. This platform is recognized for industry-leading risk management. They have FX solutions that meet the highest regulatory standards, and the complexity and audit frameworks built are for the most stringent requirements. And that's why, public companies that have billions of dollars trust them to manage their treasury. So what does this acquisition actually do for Ripple? Well, first, it provides direct access to decision makers. The acquisition immediately opens massive doors for Ripple. Direct relationship with CFOs and treasurers at global companies. Their trusted software already integrated with most of these corporations allows them a backdoor again or a Trojan horse to have the ability to introduce blockchain technology where it creates the most value. This also allows them to access these enterprises that have been skeptical of crypto and have stayed away so that they already work with somebody they already trust in order to be able to implement these tools. Second, it bridges traditional and blockchain finance. This acquisition bridges traditional corporate finance with blockchain capabilities. The corporate treasuries have been very skeptical of crypto. Their trust has been extended to the treasury management software. So G Treasury providing these blockchain capabilities within their familiar framework and tools allows them to easily integrate with these corporations and their workflows. It also has massive synergies with Ripple, Hidden Road, and Rail. The corporate treasurers using G Treasury can now access the global repo market through Hidden Road. They can lend them their liquidity on their balance sheet and they can trade it in overnight repo and they can make money on it. Or they can create other products that allow them to generate yield on their assets without having to move them to a risky counterparty. Companies can earn returns with idle cash instead of leaving it sitting in a low-yielding account. Treasuries can move money instantly 24/7, 365 using Ripple's payment rails through Rail, and the combination unlocks the capital that currently is trapped in outdated systems or sitting stagnant and not generating additional value for the company. The go-to-market strategy on this is crazy. G Treasury's clients already trust their platform that they're using. Ripple can introduce new capabilities gradually with familiar software, and the CFOs don't need to learn new systems. They get enhanced features in their existing tools. And the adoption happens through evolution with trusted relationships and a revolution where they get circumvented or they have to adopt something they don't want to. This creates a natural path for XRP and ROUSD's adoption. As G Treasury clients make cross-border payments, XRP provides instant settlement and reduces costs. ROUSD stablecoin becomes the bridge for corporations that are hesitant to XRP's volatility, and the integration makes adoption organic rather than forced. Treasuries will use it because it solves real problems, not because they're speculating on cryptocurrency. So why would they move to, using XRP and ROUSD if they're using G Treasury as it's existed before? Well, once Fortune 500 companies integrate, they're going to see the cost savings. They're going to see the efficiencies. They're going to see the benefits. They're going to be able to move cash real time from one account to another on weekends and evenings in order to have their best capital stack and structure and mitigate risk across their corporation, and also be able to take advantage of opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have just sitting their cash in an idle bank account. And them layering the prime broker relationships with Hidden Road and the stablecoin infrastructure, it becomes second to none for their ability to do all of this and an end-to-end solution. So we have standard custody as the trust bank here in the US, but they needed something globally. And that's where Palisade comes in, which was really kind of the fourth pillar of their institutional product and the acquisitions this year in 2025. So in November of 2025, Ripple announced that they made the acquisition of Palisade, which was another, early round. They were an early round investor for this corporation, so it set them up on the cap table and allowed that to happen. We've seen that again and again with them. They'll make a strategic investment that they think is going to work out over the long term, and they made a bunch of them, and then some of those have turned into acquisitions later. We don't know how much they purchased them for because the financial terms were not disclosed. This acquisition was announced by Ripple at Ripple Swell during that conference that I attended in New York in November 2025. Palisade brings wallet as a service technology to Ripple's portfolio. It extends Ripple's custody capabilities beyond banks and financial institutions. It enables fintechs, native crypto firms, and other corporates to handle high-frequency transactions using a multi-party computation, or MPC, and zero-trust architecture for its security. It provides fast wallet provisioning and transaction signing in milliseconds. The technology will be integrated with Ripple payments, enabling rapid money movement scenarios like subscription payments. It'll also support collection capabilities for businesses, secure provisioning for wallets at scale, being able to sweep funds cleanly into operational accounts, and also offer multi-chain support and DeFi integrations over the long term. So what's the strategic importance of Palisade? They've made Treasury and Rail and ROUSD, and they've already got their own custody software. Why do they need Palisade? Well, it completes Ripple's custody offering across all customer service types, and it handles the use cases where assets must be mobilized quickly. It's going to support businesses that need these high-frequency transaction and trading capabilities, which the other infrastructure wouldn't have without this addition. So it fills these gaps, right? Like they have almost everything to end, and there was just this one gap, so they needed Palisade in order to fill it. It allows them to operate, a full suite of services between Medico and standard custody, with consumer-facing applications. So what does it look like as far as their broader strategy, though? Well, banks and institutions use Medico and standard custody for deep, secure storage. Business and fintechs use Palisade for operational, high-velocity transactions. It's kind of like a hot wallet. So they have the cold wallet solution, and this is their hot wallet solution. And it brings a complete custody spectrum across all market segments. Every single type of digital asset holder can find an appropriate solution if they are an enterprise to work with Ripple at this point. So the fifth pillar that's actually not an acquisition is something that spun out of Ripple earlier this year. Ashish Birla came out and announced that they were going to do a SPAC with Michael Arrington to be listed as a treasury company on the stock exchange here in the US. The ticker is going to be XRPN, and that SPAC should be finalized in the first quarter of 2025. Again, Ripple just invested here. They didn't actually fund this. This is not under their corporate umbrella. But it does drive additional demand for XRP over the long term. And obviously, they probably have some synergies or will work with Treasury and Hidden Road, Ripple Prime, and use ROUSD and many of the other things to continue to add value and maybe trial things or generate additional returns or seed DeFi products in the open market so that there can be institutional adoption. It's a collaborative relationship, basically. Some of their key backers include SBI, who committed $200 million, Ripple and RippleWorks also backing the initiative, and other backers include Pantera Capital, Kraken, and GSR. Ripple's co-founder, Chris Larson, also participated in the round, and then a few other small exchanges like Uphold. Evernorth's business model goes beyond just holding XRP. The company plans to lend XRP to institutions, provide liquidity to markets and exchanges, participate in DeFi strategies to generate yield, and this creates additional utility for XRP as the treasury grows. The goal is to grow their XRP per share over time and not just track the price with a one-to-one MNAV like the ETFs would. They want, to be able to trade above the asset and generate additional value. So with all the other acquisitions that Ripple has made, this completes Ripple's integrated infrastructure strategy. You got Logos and Algorithm, which provided foundational custody and wallet infrastructure. You got Medico, which brought enterprise-grade custody for institutional clients. You got Standard Custody, which added U.S. regulatory licensing and a trust charter. You have Hidden Road, which is now Ripple Prime, which provides institutional custody, clearing, and prime brokerage at scale, along with Rail, which was made a little bit later in 2025, which enables seamless stablecoin payments without crypto complexity. Treasury connects all this directly to Fortune 500 companies and their treasury operations. Palisade allows them to handle high-frequency trading and wallet infrastructure with multi-sig. And Evernorth creates a sustainable buying pressure and institutional adoption signal. If you want to become a platform, you have to stack things, and you need an end-to-end solution. And now that they've made all these acquisitions, Ripple's positioning a product called Ripple One which is an end-to-end solution for all of these institutions. Across all their acquisitions, they've deployed an extraordinary amount of capital, which has been funded by their sales of XRP. I don't make any bones about that. They obviously have leveraged that along with their other business revenue to be able to get to the scale that they are to continue to drive institutional demand and adoption for XRP, which is good for everybody that owns it. Not financial advice, and that's probably where I should throw it in. Anything said here is not financial advice. It's only for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please consult with a financial advisor before making any financial decisions. If you need a financial advisor that can tell you what to do with your money in crypto, you can always reach out to digitalwealthpartners.net, and our team there would love to have a conversation with you and help you make the best decisions for you and your family when investing in digital assets. So back to the acquisitions. What were the amounts that they bought all these companies for? Well, it's $250 million for Medico. It's about $25 million for Standard Custody, $1.25 billion for Hidden Road, $200 million for Rail, $1 billion for G Treasury. They didn't talk about, what it was for Palisade, but I'm going to guess less than $100 million for Palisade. So that's over $3.7 billion in disclosed investments in building this infrastructure, which is wild. By November of 2025, Ripple has invested around $4 billion total across the crypto sector. And this level of spending signals several important things. Ripple has significant cash reserves, enabling them to make moves. They see a time-sensitive opportunity requiring fast action. For them to deploy this much capital in 2025 tells you that 2026 is going to be an exponential move for the adoption of this asset class at scale for financial infrastructure. And they believe the infrastructure play generates far greater returns if they make these acquisitions now versus later. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made them. They're willing to invest heavily while others are cautious. Even though we do have bipartisan approval for crypto regulations here, we've seen a lot of other people kind of just sit back and wait to see what's going to happen until we have those fully codified in 26. And I think the people that are being aggressive and moving the ball forward here in 25 are going to be the ones that have the best returns and see the most upside in 2026 and beyond. What Ripple is assembling through these acquisitions creates an integrated financial platform spanning institutional prime brokerage, corporate treasury. So why does this infrastructure play change everything? It's a vertically integrated system. Ripple now controls multiple critical layers of financial services. At the custody layer, we've talked about Medico and Standard Custody, Hidden Road and Palisade. All of those manage institutional assets at scale. And then they have a clearing layer from Hidden Road or Ripple Prime now that processes and settles transactions across multiple markets and provides them leverage to be able to extend lines of credit. So if they wanted to lend against XRP, they could. If they wanted to lend against ROUSD, they could. And that also incentivizes people to hold those assets. They also have their stablecoin layer, which provides seamless payment infrastructure and adoption for institutions where if they were hesitant before or didn't understand it, now it's easy for them to get access to this. And the same thing with G Treasury. They already manage the treasury of all of these large corporates. They're just going to be able to roll out, new features and tools that integrate this stuff on the back end without them having to disrupt their business or adopt something new. A lot of this is just a Trojan horse that gets Ripple in the back end so that they can put XRP into these strategic positions along with their stablecoin ROUSD. This vertical integration is rare in financial services. Most companies specialize in one layer or partner for the rest. The partnerships create friction, delays, and finger pointing when problems occur, right? So if you control the entire stack, it means Ripple can optimize the complete experience for their clients, and they can innovate faster without having to wait for partners to upgrade this stuff. I understand. So let's look and consider how this works in practice for a corporate client. Well, let's say you're a Fortune 500 company that uses G Treasury for management, and they need to make a cross-border payment for suppliers. Well, G Treasury would route that payment through Rail's stablecoin infrastructure using ROUSD. That settlement would happen instantly. It reduces their cost and eliminates delays. And the excess cash can then be deployed into the repo market, Hidden Road, Ripple Prime, which generates yield on that money without them having to wait until the weekend's over or somebody else decides to get off their butt and make things happen. Or they want to float the money and make the money and not pass it on to whoever their client is. All the custody for this is handled by Ripple's integrated custody solutions, and it all happens inside Ripple's integrated ecosystem, again, calling that Ripple One. So what does this mean for XRP? XRP's role evolves from a speculative currency to a functional infrastructure component. As Hidden Road processes more transactions, XRP provides settlement liquidity. As G Treasury makes more cross-border payments, XRP reduces frictions and costs. As institutions use RippleNet, XRP serves as a bridge asset between currencies, and the utility-driven demand is fundamentally different than the speculative demand that we see across most crypto. Alongside this, they're going to have huge adoption for ROUSD, their stablecoin, which will serve as a bridge for risk-adverse institutions. Corporates hesitant about XRP's volatility can use ROUSD for stable dollar exposure. And ROUSD exceeds $1 billion in 2025 as their total market capitalization, which is a huge move. Just in 1 year, $0 to $1 billion is a big deal, just like Digital Wealth Partners did that on the RIA side, which is wild. This could be used on-chain for MasterCard settlements in partnership with WeBank and Gemini, and it also provides familiar dollar-denominated exposure while introducing blockchain benefits. So let's talk about Evernorth again. With that $1 billion XRP Treasury, institutions would see consistent buying pressure. We've seen this through the ETFs, and this also will allow confidence to be gained in exposure to the asset. Higher prices will absolutely improve XRP's utility for large value transfers and transactions. And we know that it needs to be a high stable price. I think that we're going to see 3, 4, 5, 6 digits for XRP eventually. The better liquidity attracts more institutions who need to move meaningful amounts. And this creates a positive feedback loop or a flywheel that continues to drive utility and adoption for XRP and the price higher and higher. When it comes to ROUSD, the stablecoin integration increases XRP's utility indirectly. Institutions that are comfortable with ROUSD would become familiar with Ripple's ecosystem. ROUSD transactions could evolve into XRP for certain cross-border operations that might have lower costs using XRP than the stablecoin. And the stablecoin adoption serves as a gateway to broader XRP usage, and liquidity begets liquidity. So the more liquidity that's on the XRPL, the more liquidity XRP has access to, and it continues with that positive feedback loop. The stablecoin provides a familiar on-ramp for conservative institutions, and it allows people to participate in financial products like VanEck Money Market that is interoperable with ROUSD for payments both in and out, being able to generate 6 to 9% on your ROUSD in their account. The network effects compound over time. More institutions using Ripple's infrastructure means more XRP and more ROUSD utility. And the higher utility supports higher valuations through organic demand. And better valuations attract more institutional interest, and each cycle reinforces the previous one. Amazon's success came from building infrastructure, not just from selling products, very similar to Ripple. You got AWS, it became the most profitable piece of their business. That was infrastructure. They own all of the warehouses and logistics and the cloud and the marketplace. The vertical integration made them dominant because their costs were lower than everybody else, and they could, come into new markets and lose money and force other competitors out. And I think you're going to see that same situation here with Ripple because of the economies of scale that they're going to see in the institutional adoption. They're going to be able to offer much lower costs to people and still keep very good margins and drive other people out of business unless they adopt a similar technology in order to be able to compete. So them following the same playbook, Ripple owns custody through Medico, Standard Custody, Hidden Road, and Palisade. They own treasury management through G Treasury. They own stablecoin payment infrastructure through Rail. They own their own payment rails through RippleNet. And now they have settlement through XRP and ROUSD. And this vertical integration creates a similar dominance potential for them to take over these markets very similar to the way that Amazon did. The key insight is that infrastructure plays create winner-take-all dynamics. Once institutions integrate deeply, switching becomes cost prohibitive most of the time. Network effects make the large networks exponentially more valuable than small ones, and first movers that execute well often become permanent market leaders. Ripple's aggressive acquisitions and strategic positioning puts them in that position today to take full advantage of that and position them as the global leader for crypto payments and XRP's adoption for much higher prices. Ripple's acquisition spree isn't just a random collection of companies. It's a systemic infrastructure building to dominate institutional finance for the decades to come. From the early institutional acquisitions of Logos and Algom through the $250 million Medico deal to the massive plays in 2025 with Hidden Road and G Treasury, each acquisition fills a specific strategic gap for the company. Hidden Road provides the institutional custody and clearing layer, serving 300 plus institutional partners and hedge funds and other sophisticated traders. G Treasury delivers the corporate treasury gateway to Fortune 500 companies, processing $12.5 trillion in payments annually. The $1 billion XRP Treasury, created by Evernorth, generates sustainable buying pressure and demand for XRP and also signals institutional conviction. All of this together creates a vertically integrated platform spanning multiple critical layers for financial services. It is an end-to-end one-stop shop solution for any institutional partner to get access to this. The market hasn't fully priced in Ripple and what it's becoming. Most investors, when they think of Ripple, it's synonymous with XRP and would compete with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it's completely separate. This misunderstanding creates opportunity for those who see the infrastructure play. These acquisitions position them to be the go-to solution as the regulatory environment supports it, and trillion-dollar markets have access through these relationships Ripple has just acquired. For more in-depth information, we would love to have you in our community. You can go check it out at beyondbroke.com. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Tell me if you think that Ripple is going to be the juggernaut that's going to, take over the industry and rival Coinbase, probably have a bigger IPO than them here in 2026 or 27. Or, is all this hogwash? They're not going to use XRP. It's only ROUSD. If you don't own Ripple stock and you're holding XRP, are you crazy? You guys know what I think. My only position that I personally hold is XRP. We do have some exposure to Ripple through other means, but my total investable income goes toward XRP because I do think it is going to see the majority of the value creation. The value's in the protocol, and Ripple is who's enforcing the use of that protocol, and they will be one of the players that do it. There'll be many other people that come to market in order to be able to compete with them, like we talked about here, in their full end-to-end solution with Ripple One. If they don't use the same infrastructure at scale globally, they're just not going to be able to compete with Ripple's offering. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you again for taking time to watch this video. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.